A breathtaking modern palace loomed over the quiet town of Aurora, untouched by poverty, untouched by pain. They said it was built by men who could buy silence, and designed by someone who had no heart left to break. Every morning when the fog lifted over the valley, sunlight struck the palace's mirrored walls, like a warning. From the market streets below, it glittered like a second sun, a reminder of how close power lived and how far it stayed. In the cramped kitchen of a small brick house at the town's edge, Savannah Reed, 22, brilliant but jobless, scrolled through her phone. A post caught her eye. Domestic help needed in the House of Kings. Confidential residence, high pay. She froze. The title pulsed in her mind like an invitation, or a trap. Her mother's voice broke the silence. "Savannah, you didn't study economics for 4 years to scrub floors." Savannah forced a laugh, but it cracked midway. "It's just a job, Mom. I can't keep waiting for miracles." Her mother wiped her hands on a worn towel. "That palace isn't a home. It's a kingdom, and kingdoms always cost something." Savannah didn't reply. The phone screen glowed on the table, and the palace photo seemed almost alive, glass towers reflecting the clouds, marble steps rising like judgment. By evening, desperation won over pride. She clicked apply. 3 days later, her phone rang. A calm female voice said, "Miss Reed, you've been shortlisted. The House of Montgomery invites you for an interview. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Her heart stopped for a beat. The Montgomerys? No one in town ever spoke their name above a whisper. The next morning, mist rolled across Aurora as Savannah climbed the hill road. The palace grew larger with every turn. Sleek glass, sharp lines, black-clad guards at the gates. Her taxi driver muttered, "People go in there and forget who they were." Savannah smiled nervously. Maybe that's the point. At the entrance, security scanners hummed. Men in suits whispered into earpieces. A fingerprint scan, a metal detector, even a retina check, just to meet a potential employer. The gates opened silently. Inside, the driveway curved through gardens too perfect to be real. Trimmed hedges, silver fountains, and a fleet of black supercars, parked like sleeping beasts. A woman in gray uniform approached. "Miss Reed, follow me. The interview will begin shortly." The interview room wasn't really a room. It was a hall lined with white marble, its walls hung with abstract art that felt expensive but emotionless. At the far end sat a man behind a glass desk, young, impeccably dressed, silent. He didn't look up immediately, just turned a silver pen between his fingers. When he finally met her eyes, Savannah felt her throat tighten. His gaze was calm but unreadable, like staring into a still ocean that hid storms below. He spoke softly. "You studied economics at Aurora University?" "Yes, sir." "And now you wish to work as domestic help?" She hesitated. "I need work, sir. Any honest work." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite disdain. "Honesty is a luxury here, Miss Reed. Discretion is what we pay for." He rose, extended a document, and said only, "You start tomorrow. Report to Ms. Lang." Savannah blinked. "Just like that?" He didn't answer. By the time she looked up again, he was already walking away, disappearing behind a set of mirrored doors. Ms. Lang, the head maid, escorted her through endless corridors. Every surface gleamed. Every step echoed. Paintings of unfamiliar faces watched silently from the walls. "You will reside here," Lang said, unlocking a door. Savannah stepped inside and gasped. Her maid's quarters looked more like a 5-star suite. King-size bed, balcony view of the city lights, fresh orchids on the table, silk curtains dancing in the evening breeze. This can't be for me." Lang's expression didn't change. "You are now part of the house. You will be treated accordingly." Savannah turned slowly, awed and unsettled. "Who exactly lives here, Ms. Lang?" The woman paused at the doorway. "Curiosity doesn't survive long on this hill." Later, as Savannah unpacked, she couldn't shake the sense of surveillance. Cameras glimmered faintly in the corners, and somewhere beyond the walls, a faint hum. Machinery? servers, never stopped. She stood on the balcony. From here, Aurora looked like a toy town. Tiny lights, tiny people, tiny dreams. A whisper escaped her lips. What have I gotten myself into? The wind didn't answer, but behind her, the door creaked. Ms. Lang stood there again, expression hard as stone. One more thing, Miss Reed. Yes, ma'am? Lang stepped closer, her voice low and deliberate. There's only one rule in this palace. Never ask questions. Savannah froze. Lang smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides fear. Sleep well. Tomorrow your first task awaits. The door shut softly, and the silence that followed was heavier than gold. Outside, the palace lights flickered, once, twice, as if acknowledging a new piece had entered the game. And somewhere, deep in the halls of glass and shadow, someone whispered Savannah's name, as if they had been waiting for her all along. The morning didn't arrive with sunlight. It arrived with a knock, sharp, deliberate, and far too early for comfort. Savannah woke to the sound of someone at her door. She glanced at the clock, 5:02 a.m. The palace was still cloaked in silence, the kind that pressed against the skin. When she opened the door, Ms. Lang stood there, expression unreadable, holding a small velvet envelope sealed in gold wax. Dress in white, she said simply. You leave in 10 minutes. No explanation, no greeting, just an order that carried the weight of centuries of obedience. Savannah slipped into the white uniform laid out the night before, crisp, spotless, almost ceremonial. The envelope sat in her palm, heavier than paper should feel. The wax bore a crest, 2 lions, one with its eyes closed. Outside, a black car waited. The driver didn't speak. The route twisted down the hill, away from glass perfection and into the waking city. Aurora was just stirring, vendors lifting shutters, children chasing school buses, streetlights blinking off one by one. Savannah looked out the window and realized how far she'd already drifted from that ordinary world. She unfolded the note attached to the envelope. It contained just one line. Deliver to Pier 41, South Bay District. Do not speak. Do not wait for thanks. The car stopped near the waterfront, a place once filled with music and markets, now abandoned to silence and salt. Concrete cracked under the weight of forgotten years. A luxury building stood at the edge, its glass windows fogged with dust, its nameplate faded to silver ghosts of letters. Pier 41. Savannah hesitated at the entrance. Inside, air hung heavy with mildew and memory. Then she saw her, a woman in sunglasses, seated at a broken piano, as if waiting for someone who never arrived. Her hair was pinned too neatly for this ruin, her coat too fine for the decay around her. Without speaking, Savannah approached and extended the envelope. The woman took it, fingers brushing Savannah's wrist just long enough to chill her blood. Tell them, the woman said softly, that silence costs more than loyalty. Savannah opened her mouth to reply, but the woman raised a finger to her lips. The woman disappeared into the shadows of the building, leaving Savannah alone. She waited, unsure why. The instruction had been to deliver, nothing more. But something in the air held her there, like a magnet she couldn't see. Minutes became hours. The tide crawled closer, licking at the concrete. Her white shoes turned gray with dust and salt. Finally, the driver reappeared as silently as before. He said only, "Back to the hill." When Savannah returned, no one greeted her. No one asked questions. Not Ms. Lang, not the guards, not the cooks she passed in the corridor. It was as if the morning had been erased from history. Her breakfast tray arrived without a word. The palace clock struck 10. Life went on, polished, efficient, eerily normal. Savannah's mind, however, was anything but calm. She replayed the woman's words in her head. Silence costs more than loyalty. By afternoon, curiosity had turned to fear. She cornered another maid in the laundry wing, a timid girl named Marisol. "Has anyone ever sent you on an errand?" Savannah asked quietly. Marisol's hands froze mid-fold. Then, without meeting Savannah's eyes, she whispered, "Everyone gets one, Eventually. One what? Their first task. And after that? Marisol's throat bobbed. You learn not to ask. Then she hurried away. That night, Savannah sat by her window, staring at the city lights. Every story she'd ever heard about the Montgomery Palace felt suddenly real, and far darker than gossip deserved. She remembered her mother's warning. Kingdoms always cost something. What was the cost here? Her voice? Her freedom? Her soul? A soft knock came at the door again. But this time, it wasn't Ms. Lang. A young man stood there, his posture sharp but his eyes kind. He looked like someone who had once smiled a lot, before learning not to. Elijah, he introduced himself quietly. The butler. Can I help you? Savannah asked. He hesitated, then said, You already have. What do you mean? The first task, it's not about delivery. It's about obedience. They needed to see if you'd follow orders without understanding them. Savannah frowned. Who's they? He lowered his voice. Everyone here works for the same man, but not everyone works for the same reason. Before she could speak again, he stepped back into the hallway. Be careful, Savannah. The palace doesn't punish disobedience. It rewrites it. Sleep refused to come. The room felt colder, the lights dimmer. Every creak in the walls sounded like footsteps. Savannah finally rose to pour water. That's when she noticed something. Her drawer slightly open. She hadn't left it that way. Inside, a folded scrap of paper rested neatly on top of her notebook. Her heart thudded as she unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, feminine, controlled. Run before your second task. She froze, staring at the words until they blurred. The paper smelled faintly of roses, the same scent that drifted through the hall near the interview room. Savannah's fingers trembled as she looked around the empty suite, her reflection staring back at her from mirrored walls. Someone had been in her room. Someone knew her name. Someone wanted her gone. And as dawn crept over the palace once more, Savannah realized she hadn't just taken a job. She'd stepped into a story that didn't belong to her, yet somehow had been waiting for her all along. They said the man who owned the palace didn't believe in God, only in algorithms, money, and control. But that night, Savannah realized he also believed in ghosts. The palace came alive like a stage before a grand performance. Staff rushed through marble halls, silver trays clinked, and chandeliers blazed brighter than daylight. Rumors flew like birds trapped under glass. A grand ball was being hosted, not for royalty, but for power. Politicians, CEOs, dignitaries, all invited by the man whose name made newspapers whisper, Chase Montgomery. To the world, he was a tech billionaire, 34, widowed, reclusive. To his staff, he was something else, a shadow that paid them to exist in silence. Savannah had been assigned to the West Hall service team. White gloves, polished silver, perfect posture, and one command, see everything, say nothing. The ballroom shimmered, golden drapes, crystal floors, violins whispering in the background. She caught glimpses of Aurora's elite laughing, as though nothing in the world outside existed, as if wealth had erased the concept of pain. But every few minutes, Savannah's gaze drifted to the grand staircase, the only part of the palace still roped off, the north wing. Ms. Lang had said no one entered it without invitation. And that's where he appeared. The air changed before he even reached the room. Conversation softened, music slowed, even laughter felt rehearsed. Chase Montgomery descended the staircase, dressed in a black suit that seemed cut from midnight itself. His presence wasn't loud. It was gravitational. Every eye followed him. Savannah froze behind the wine table, pretending to adjust glasses. He was nothing like she imagined, not cruel-looking, not even distant. Just composed, impossibly calm, his gaze steady like someone who'd already read the ending of every story in the room. And yet, when his eyes met hers, just for a second, something flickered. Recognition, curiosity, or something older. He approached. Wine, he said simply. His voice, smooth, quiet, dangerous in its restraint. Savannah poured carefully, her hands trembling slightly. He noticed. Of course he did. A faint smirk tugged at his lips. First event? "Yes, sir," she said, barely above a whisper. "Don't worry, we only bite when provoked." He took the glass, his fingers brushing hers. A shock ran through her like static. Then he was gone, moving toward a cluster of senators and investors, leaving her with a heartbeat that refused to calm. Later, in the service corridor, Savannah overheard two maids whispering. "She served him?" "Don't say that out loud. The last one who did vanished." "Vanished how?" "Just gone. Like she never existed." Savannah turned sharply. "Who vanished?" The maids looked at her, and both went silent. One crossed herself, the other walked away. The rest of the night blurred into silver trays and silent stares. By the time the guests departed, Savannah's feet ached, but her mind was racing. She found Elijah waiting outside her quarters, leaning against the wall, his tie undone. "You shouldn't have looked him in the eyes," he said quietly. "What?" "Mr. Montgomery. He notices people, the way most people notice storms. Once he sees you, you don't leave his weather." Savannah frowned. "Are you warning me?" "I'm advising you. The maid before you, her name was Lydia. She was noticed, and then she wasn't." Savannah's chest tightened. "What happened to her?" Elijah's expression softened, sorrow slipping through the cracks. "She was close to him? Too close. And the closer you get to the fire, in this house, the less anyone can tell if you're burning or glowing." That night, Savannah typed a resignation letter, simple, respectful, final. She placed it on Ms. Lang's desk before dawn. By noon, it had vanished, and her new paycheck notification buzzed on her phone. Her salary had tripled. Her mother texted her out of nowhere. "Sweetheart, someone from the palace just sent groceries and medicine. Did you arrange that?" Savannah stared at the message, pulse racing. She hadn't. The palace treated her differently after that. Meals delivered early, clothes replaced with tailored uniforms, fresh flowers every morning. She felt both cherished and watched. Every kindness carried the weight of control, and sometimes, at night, she thought she heard footsteps outside her door. Not heavy, not rushed, just waiting. It happened 3 nights after the ball. A guard appeared at her door and said, "Mr. Montgomery requests your presence in the north wing." Savannah froze. "I thought no staff were allowed there." The guard's expression didn't change. "Exceptions are made." The corridor to the north wing was darker, quieter, lined with portraits of a woman, the same woman in each painting, a face too beautiful, too haunting to forget. At the end of the hall, double doors opened slowly, revealing a study filled with books, soft light, and Chase Montgomery himself, seated, writing in a leather-bound journal. He looked up. "Miss Reed." "Sir?" "Do you know why I hired you?" Savannah shook her head. He leaned back, studying her like a puzzle he'd already solved. "You remind me of someone." Her breath caught. "Who?" He turned toward the window, his reflection merging with the night. "Someone I buried." And in that moment, Savannah realized the palace wasn't haunted by ghosts of the dead, but by the living who refuse to let go. Some rooms are alive, even when no one lives in them. Savannah learned this the moment she stepped into the north wing, the place where Chase Montgomery kept his ghosts. For days after their first encounter, Savannah's mind spiraled. "You remind me of someone I buried." Those words clung to her like perfume that refused to fade, and yet, instead of being dismissed, she was called again. Same time, same silence, same command. When she entered his study the second night, Chase was standing by the piano, fingers ghosting across the keys. No music came out, just the sound of his hand brushing dust from ivory. He didn't look at her. "Do you play?" "I used to," Savannah said softly. Before life became about survival." His lips curved, half amusement, half sorrow. "That's the same answer she gave me." After a long pause, he gestured for her to follow. They walked down a private corridor she hadn't seen before. The air was colder here, heavy with memory. At the end stood a white door carved with roses. When it opened, Savannah gasped. The room was a sanctuary of stillness, White roses in glass vases, a baby grand piano gleaming beneath soft light, and portraits of a woman whose beauty was both elegant and unreachable. Chase stood near one, his eyes tracing the curve of her smile. "Celine Montgomery," he said quietly. "My wife, my reason for everything, and maybe my punishment." Savannah's breath caught. The woman in the painting was the same face that hung in every hallway, serene, perfect, tragic. "She died?" Savannah asked. Chase nodded. 3 years ago. An accident, they said. But nothing in this palace is ever just an accident. For the first time, Chase spoke freely. He told her how Celine had been the only person who saw through his empire, through the algorithms, the walls, the empire of silence he'd built. "She wasn't afraid of my wealth," he said. "She was afraid of what it would turn me into." Savannah listened, torn between compassion and curiosity. "Do you think she'd still be afraid?" she asked quietly. He smiled faintly. "If she could see me now? Yes. But she'd stay anyway." Days later, Ms. Lang arrived with a new assignment, this one handwritten, sealed, and chillingly personal. "Mr. Montgomery requests your help," she said. "You're to organize Mrs. Montgomery's journals. Every page must be read, catalogued, and restored." Savannah blinked. "Journals? You mean?" Lang's eyes narrowed. "You'll work alone, and you'll forget what you read." The library where the journals were kept felt sacred and forbidden. Leather-bound notebooks lined the shelves, each embossed with the letter C. Their scent was old paper, ink, and heartbreak. Savannah began her task slowly, careful not to smudge the fragile pages. The first entry read, "To love a man like Chase is to love a storm and pretend you enjoy drowning." Savannah felt her chest tighten. Each entry grew darker. Suspicion, silence, loneliness. "He's hiding something behind his codes. The numbers don't lie, but his eyes do." By the fourth day, Savannah realized these weren't just diaries. They were warnings. Chase visited occasionally, never for long. Sometimes to ask if she'd eaten, sometimes just to watch her work. Once, she caught him staring at her from the doorway, not saying a word. When she looked up, he turned away, as though afraid she might see too much. The staff began to whisper again. "She's in the north wing. She's been chosen. She's next." Elijah avoided her eyes now, always moving, always listening. When she cornered him one night, he only said, "The closer you get, the harder it is to see the truth." One afternoon, unexpectedly, Savannah's mother arrived at the gates, escorted by palace guards. "Mom," Savannah whispered, rushing forward. "How did you—" "A car came to pick me up," her mother said, her voice trembling. "They said you'd sent for me." "I didn't." Her mother looked around the hallways, her eyes reflecting fear. "This place isn't right, Savannah. It feels hollow, like it's pretending to be alive." When she left hours later, she didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just hugged Savannah tightly and whispered, "Don't let them change who you are." That night, Savannah found a journal unlike the others, bound in white leather, edges frayed, pages missing. Inside, only a single entry remained, written in a rushed hand. "He knows, but he'll never admit it." The ink trailed off, smudged by what might have been tears or blood. Savannah closed the journal slowly. Her reflection in the glass looked different now. Older, wiser, more afraid. When Chase appeared again, she couldn't hold it in. "Celine wrote that you knew something. Something about her death." His eyes darkened. "You've been reading what wasn't meant for you." "She wanted to be heard," Savannah said, voice shaking. "Maybe that's why I'm here." Chase stepped closer, shadows cutting across his face. "And what if hearing her means destroying me? Then maybe destruction is what truth looks like in this house." He stared at her for a long time, something breaking quietly behind his calm expression. Then, almost gently, he said, "You should rest, Miss Reed. Tomorrow will be heavier." As he left, she noticed his hand brush the piano, the same piano that had never played since she arrived. But this time, one note sounded, soft, mourning, real. And as the echo faded, Savannah realized the palace didn't just remember its dead. It kept their stories alive, waiting for someone brave, or foolish, enough to read them aloud. Every story begins with a letter, and Savannah's began with one too, sealed in velvet, carried by fear, and forgotten far too soon. But the palace never forgets. It only waits. The days after reading Celine's final journal entry passed in silence. Savannah still served, still cleaned, still obeyed. But something inside her had shifted. Now every hallway felt like a lie she hadn't yet uncovered. Every glance from the staff felt like pity. Every smile from Chase felt like manipulation. And that velvet envelope, her first task, haunted her dreams. One morning, she found herself standing at the same balcony where she'd first watched the city shimmer. Below, Aurora moved like a breathing organism, oblivious to the secrets locked in the palace above. She whispered to herself, "Who was that woman at Pier 41? Elijah's voice came from behind her. "You shouldn't ask that." Savannah turned. "Then you tell me, what was inside that envelope?" Elijah hesitated, then said, "Truth has a cost here. Are you willing to pay it?" "Yes," he sighed. "Then you need to understand something, Savannah. You're not just working here. You're involved." "Involved in what?" "The Montgomery system," he said quietly. "It's not just a family. It's an operation." That night, when the palace slept, Savannah began to search. She revisited the staff quarters, the archives, even the kitchen ledgers. She found a file locked behind a cabinet drawer. Pier 41, Legal Holdings. It contained photos of the same building she had delivered the envelope to. But the sign out front wasn't faded. It was clear. Weston and Greer Law Group, the same firm that once represented Chase Montgomery's rival company, before it mysteriously went bankrupt overnight. Her heart pounded. That envelope hadn't been a message. It had been a command, and she'd been the messenger. The next day, she cornered Elijah near the East Garden. "That building was a law firm," she said. "The day I went there, it was still open. Now it's gone. What was I delivering, Elijah?" He looked around before answering. "Information, leverage, sometimes blackmail, sometimes mercy." Savannah stepped back, disgusted. "You're saying we're part of some operation?" Elijah's eyes hardened. "We're all part of it. The drivers, the cooks, even Ms. Lang. This palace isn't a home, it's a network. Everything looks beautiful, so no one questions the ugliness beneath." Savannah's throat went dry. "Then what's my part?" He hesitated. "You're the replacement." "For who?" Elijah's gaze fell. "For the last person who tried to ask these same questions." That evening, when Savannah returned to her quarters, something new lay on her desk. Another velvet envelope, identical to the first. But this one had her name written in cursive. The seal was unbroken, yet her fingers trembled as she lifted it. On the back, the date read 3 months before she ever applied for the job. She sank into her chair, disbelief flooding her. How could they have known her name, her face, her existence, before she'd even joined the palace? Her phone buzzed suddenly. An email notification. No sender, no subject, just a single line of text. "You were chosen, Savannah, not hired." Her pulse raced. She opened the palace employment portal on her tablet, searching her own record. There was no resume uploaded, no background check, no signature file. Her interview wasn't even listed. Everything had been fabricated. The man who interviewed her, Chase, had already known her name. Her assignment wasn't random. It was orchestrated. She felt her breath quicken as truth began to piece itself together like broken glass reforming its shape. Celine's journal, the law firm, the secret network, and herself, right in the middle of it all. She ran to find Elijah again, but his room was empty, his closet bare, his bed stripped. Only one item remained, a folded napkin resting on the pillow, written in rushed ink. "They know you've started asking questions. If you want to live, pretend you haven't." Savannah pressed the paper to her chest. "No, Elijah, you can't just disappear." Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Guards, moving quickly. She blew out the candlelight and hid the note inside her uniform pocket. That night, the palace felt alive again. Lights flickering, voices murmuring through earpieces, doors clicking shut. Then came the knock. A single, deliberate knock. "Miss Reed," a voice said, "Mr. Montgomery requests you in his study." Her heart raced as she followed the guard through the dim halls. When she entered, Chase was seated behind his desk, calm as ever, and on the polished wood before him lay the very same envelope she had found, unopened, waiting. He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "You've been curious," he said. Savannah swallowed hard. "Wouldn't you be, if you were living someone else's life?" Chase rose slowly, walking around the desk until he stood only inches away. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Be careful, Savannah. The moment you learn the truth, you can never go back to ignorance." He placed a hand on the envelope. "It's time you understood why you were chosen." And as his fingers broke the seal, Savannah realized the most dangerous secrets aren't the ones hidden in envelopes. They're the ones written in blood, loyalty, and silence. Love doesn't always enter a story like sunlight through a window. Sometimes it seeps in quietly, through cracks, through fear, through the spaces where power meets loneliness. The seal cracked with a sound that felt too loud in the quiet study. Savannah's eyes followed Chase Montgomery's every movement as he unfolded the letter. He read in silence, then handed it to her. Inside, a single line of text glared back at her in precise handwriting. "She fits the parameters." Savannah frowned. "What is this supposed to mean?" Chase didn't answer immediately. He poured 2 glasses of wine, deep red, almost black under the amber light. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but cold. "It means you were chosen for your mind, Miss Reed, not your obedience." He gestured to a chair. "Sit." She hesitated, then obeyed. "Do you believe in pattern?" he asked. "I studied economics," she said. "Patterns are everything." He nodded. "So you understand people like me. We look for equations in emotion, logic in loyalty. But what happens when someone breaks the pattern?" Savannah's voice was soft. "You start noticing them." Their eyes met. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable, but it was magnetic. The next evening, a message appeared on Savannah's phone. "North Wing, 9 p.m., dinner." She nearly didn't go. Every instinct screamed to stay away. But curiosity, that dangerous pulse that had driven her since day one, won again. When she entered, the long dining table that usually seated 20 held only 2 plates. Candles flickered against the glass walls, and the city below shimmered like fallen stars. Chase stood by the window, his reflection merging with the skyline. "Sit," he said softly. The meal was quiet at first, too quiet. Then he asked, "Do you trust me?" Savannah gave a small laugh. "I barely know you." He smiled faintly. "You know more than most." Their conversation drifted from business to books, from philosophy to music. For the first time, Chase looked less like a billionaire and more like a man trying to remember what warmth felt like. The next morning, the staff was restless. Savannah could feel their stares like arrows, not out of envy, but fear. Marisol whispered, "He's never dined with anyone since Celine." Ms. Lang's voice was sharper. "Be careful, Miss Reed. The palace doesn't forgive affection." Savannah frowned. "You talk like love is a crime." Lang's eyes softened. "Here, it is." Despite herself, Savannah found it harder each day to hate him. He was ruthless, yes, but haunted too. Sometimes she'd find him standing in the rose garden at midnight, staring at nothing. Other times, she'd catch him scribbling on a napkin, the words vanishing under his palm before she could read them. One evening, as she passed by his study, he said, without looking up, "You linger, Savannah." She froze. "I wasn't—" "Don't explain," he interrupted gently. "I prefer when people don't." He looked up then, eyes soft but sharp. "You remind me of Celine, not in appearance, in resistance." The tension between them grew heavier than the marble walls. A glance lingered too long. A word carried too much meaning. Until one night, After a storm swept across Aurora, the power flickered out. Savannah was lighting candles in the library when Chase appeared, soaked from the rain, his shirt clinging to his frame. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said. "I'm fine." He stepped closer. "That's what Celine used to say." The silence between them fractured, fragile, desperate. When he reached for her face, Savannah didn't step back. Their lips met, a collision of loneliness and danger, of desire wrapped in fear. For a moment, the palace felt alive again, until the phone on his desk rang. Chase pulled away, eyes darkening as he answered. The voice on the other end was sharp, male, powerful. "Senator Holston," Chase said slowly. "Yes, I'm aware." His jaw tightened. "Do what you must." When he hung up, the warmth in the room vanished. He turned toward her. "You shouldn't have come tonight." Savannah frowned. "You invited me." "That was before the storm," he said, voice breaking slightly. "Before Holston threatened to bring everything down." "Who is Holston?" "An old ally, and my biggest enemy." He looked at her then, the same way someone looks at something they can't afford to lose. "Go back to your room. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone. Chase. Please." It was the first time he'd said her name out loud. That night, Savannah couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed his words, his touch, his warning. She opened one of Celine's journals again, searching for something, anything, that could explain what she was feeling. One line stood out, underlined twice. "Love is a trap in this palace. It looks like mercy. It smells like danger." Savannah shut the book, tears threatening. She took out her own notebook and began to write, her first entry since arriving. "If I disappear, let them know I stayed because I wanted to understand, not because I was afraid." The next day, a small box awaited her on the bed. Inside was a rare book, a poetry collection titled Echoes of the White Rose, Celine's favorite, according to the journals. As she flipped through its delicate pages, a small folded paper fell out from between the verses. She unfolded it carefully, her breath catching as she read. "He didn't kill me, but I died anyway." Celine, the ink was fresh, and as Savannah's pulse thundered, one question echoed through her mind. Was Celine's ghost warning her, or writing from somewhere she was never meant to escape? The past doesn't always knock before returning. Sometimes it slips under your door and waits for you to find it. And that morning, Savannah found hers, in the form of a photograph that shouldn't have existed. Savannah awoke to a quiet palace. Too quiet. Even the usual hum of machines, the clicking heels of guards, the distant murmurs of staff, all gone. She stepped out of her room and found a small envelope lying on the floor. No seal, no name, just her room number written in smudged ink. Her fingers shook as she tore it open. Inside was a photograph. A woman stood smiling in the palace courtyard. Same white uniform, same soft curls, same slender frame. But it wasn't Savannah. It was someone who looked exactly like her. She turned it over. On the back, a date. 2 years earlier, and beneath it, a single word. Amara. The air left her lungs. Had the palace employed someone who looked so much like her before she ever arrived? Or worse, had she replaced her? Savannah hurried down to the laundry wing, clutching the photo. The older maids were folding linens, their eyes low and fearful. "Who is she?" Savannah asked, showing them the picture. The room went still. One maid crossed herself. Another whispered, "Don't speak her name here." "Why not?" Savannah demanded. "Because she never left," one of them murmured. "Not really." When Savannah checked the staff registry later that day, the name Amara was missing. Every digital record had been wiped clean. No files, no ID number, no proof she ever existed. She found Elijah in the service corridor, voice shaking as she showed him the photo. "Elijah, who is this?" He stared at it too long. His jaw tightened. "Where did you get that?" "It was slipped under my door." He sighed, the kind of sigh that carried both warning and regret. "She was a maid here. 2 years ago. Assigned to the North Wing. Savannah's blood ran cold. Celine's wing? Yes. What happened to her? Elijah looked away. She disappeared. One night. No note, no sound. Just gone. And no one looked for her? He met her eyes. In this house, missing doesn't mean lost. It means erased. That night, Savannah slipped out of the palace. The guards were distracted with a shipment delivery. She used the moment to escape through the service gate. Aurora's night air hit her like truth. Raw, alive, dangerous. She followed an address scribbled on the back of the photograph. Old District, Apartment 47. A tired woman opened the door, her eyes weary but alert. "I'm looking for someone who used to work at the Montgomery Palace," Savannah said. "Amara." The woman froze. "Who sent you?" "No one. Please, I need to know what happened." The woman studied Savannah's face, her eyes widening. "You look just like her." "People keep saying that. Why?" "She was close to him," the woman whispered. "Too close. The staff said she was special, chosen for duties no one else was trusted with. Celine had just died. And then Amara started spending time in the North Wing." Savannah's pulse quickened. "You're saying she—" The woman cut her off. There were rumors that she was Celine's confidant, or that Chase saw in her what he lost in his wife. Savannah's hands trembled, and then she vanished. The woman nodded slowly. "They said she tried to run." Savannah returned just before dawn, her shoes covered in dust. The gates closed behind her with a finality that made her shiver. In the staff hallway, Elijah was waiting. His eyes told her he knew where she'd been. "You shouldn't have gone," he said. "People disappear for less. I'm not going to stop until I know the truth." He hesitated, then handed her a flash drive. "Take this, but watch it alone." In her room, she locked the door, plugged the drive into her laptop, and pressed play. Grainy security footage flickered, time-stamped from 2 years ago. The North Wing corridor. Midnight. Amara appeared, walking nervously down the hall, carrying a tray. She paused at the door to Chase's study, hesitated, then entered. Time skipped forward. 20 minutes. The door never opened again. Savannah's breath hitched. "No." The feed ended in static. Her reflection on the laptop screen looked ghost-like, pale, terrified, breaking apart under the weight of realization. Amara hadn't left the palace. She had vanished inside it. Savannah stormed into Chase's study that evening, trembling with fury. "What happened to her?" she demanded. He looked up slowly. "Who?" "Amara. The woman who came before me. The one who looked just like me." His silence was worse than denial. "You knew her," she whispered. "You chose me because of her." Chase stood, eyes shadowed. "You're asking questions with dangerous answers. Then give me one that's true." He stepped closer, voice soft, too soft. "Some ghosts don't haunt, Savannah. They protect." Her heart pounded. "Protect who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward the fireplace and threw a photo into the flames. It was Amara's. As the photograph burned to ash, Savannah saw her own face flicker in the firelight, and for the first time she couldn't tell if she was watching a ghost or becoming one. The palace was alive again, but this time it didn't whisper secrets. It roared with power, and Savannah stood in the middle of it, caught between the man who built the empire and the truth that could destroy it. The announcement came suddenly. "The House of Montgomery," the news outlet said, "will host the International Tech Ethics Summit, the first of its kind, bringing together the most powerful minds in the world." Inside the palace, preparations began immediately. New guards, new servers, and guests from countries Savannah had only read about. Helicopters landed on the east lawn. Black cars lined the driveway. To the world, it was an event of innovation, but to those inside the marble walls, it felt more like a war dressed in designer suits. Savannah was assigned to serve in the conference hall. Chase himself handed her the schedule, his voice measured and quiet. "You'll be visible," he said, "but invisible in purpose." "I don't understand." "You will," he replied. "Everyone here wears a mask. including me. There was something behind his calm that unsettled her, a tension that stretched like glass, about to crack. By morning, the palace had transformed. Long tables gleamed with chrome, digital displays projected financial data and future plans. Men and women in tailored suits greeted each other with smiles too polite to be honest. Savannah moved silently among them, refilling glasses, noting expressions. But she couldn't ignore the way certain guests looked at her, curious, calculating, suspicious. At one table, a woman with ice-blonde hair and sharp eyes leaned close as Savannah poured her champagne. "You're the new favorite, aren't you?" the woman said, her accent crisp and cool. "I'm just staff, ma'am." The woman smiled without warmth. "Oh, darling, no one in this palace is just anything." Savannah blinked. "And you are?" "Valerie Rousseau," the woman said, "CEO of Voxion Technologies, and Chase's former ally." She tilted her glass. "Or maybe I still am. Depends on who's winning." Throughout the summit, Savannah noticed patterns, subtle gestures, coded glances, micro-expressions that said more than words. Deals were being made that had nothing to do with technology. Data servers disguised as art installations. USB drives traded like secret currencies. By nightfall, the laughter had thinned, replaced by whispers that slithered through the corridors. Savannah overheard Valerie speaking to another guest. "He's slipping," Valerie said. "Grief makes him vulnerable. That girl, she's proof of it." Savannah stepped back, her pulse quickening. They were talking about her. Later that night, she found Chase in his private lounge, staring at the security monitors showing each event room. "You're being watched," she said quietly. He didn't turn. "I always am. They think you're losing control." A bitter smile crossed his face. "Control is an illusion, Savannah. The only question is who gets to enjoy it while it lasts." She hesitated. "Then why keep playing the game?" He finally looked at her. "Because I built the board." Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, everything else disappeared. He reached out, brushed a stray curl from her face. "You shouldn't have to see this world," he murmured. "It destroys the soft first." Savannah's voice trembled. "And yet you keep me here." "Because you still believe in redemption," he said. "And I forgot how." Before she could reply, a guard burst into the room. "Sir, we have a problem. The media feed has been breached." Chase straightened instantly, his warmth replaced by command. "Who's behind it?" "We don't know yet." He turned to Savannah, his tone clipped. "Stay here, no matter what you hear." But she didn't. As chaos spread through the palace, Savannah slipped into the security wing. Screens flashed with corrupted code, names, bank accounts, offshore transactions. The Montgomery database was being drained in real time. Then she saw it. Her name. Savannah Reed, Leverage Protocol. Her stomach dropped. She opened the file. Lines of classified text filled the screen. Subject, Reed, Savannah. Background profile, synthesized. Behavioral traits matched with Amara, deceased. Objective, infiltration and response analysis for emotional pattern testing. Her hands went numb. Synthesized? They had built her profile, designed her recruitment. She wasn't chosen. She was engineered. When Chase returned, his voice was harsh. "Why did you leave the room?" Savannah turned on him, shaking. "What am I, Chase? Another experiment? Another test?" His jaw clenched. "You weren't supposed to see that." "Then tell me what it means," she screamed. He didn't answer. The silence was worse than betrayal. Tears burned in her eyes. "You used me." He stepped closer, desperation cracking through his composure. "I didn't mean to. You have to believe that." Savannah laughed bitterly. "Believe you? After all your lies?" His next words came out like a confession he'd been forced to make. "You weren't meant to be her replacement, Savannah. You were meant to prove I could feel again." For a moment, she wanted to hate him. But hate felt too heavy for what her heart still carried. He touched her cheek gently. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. She whispered back, "You don't own me either." Their lips met, fleeting, fragile, defiant. And that's when she heard it. A small beep from the monitor behind him. Valerie's voice echoed through the speakers. Found your little weakness, Chase. How poetic. History repeating itself. Savannah turned toward the screen, her own face staring back, tagged under the words, "Asset compromised." And in that instant she realized love wasn't the trap. She was. Empires don't crumble from outside attacks. They rot from secrets buried within. And that night, the house of Montgomery trembled not from war, but from truth. The alarm pierced the night. Red lights flooded the palace corridors as digital screens blinked in chaos. System breach detected. Lockdown initiated. Doors sealed automatically. The hum of technology turned into a howl. Savannah stumbled through the main hallway as guards sprinted past, radios crackling with panic. Eliminate external access. Secure the north wing. Find Mr. Montgomery. Now. The air was electric with fear. Savannah burst into the control room. Monitors flickered with collapsing data, accounts draining, files deleting, every encrypted system bleeding information into the void. Chase stood in the center, surrounded by chaos, his voice calm but sharp. "Shut it down manually," he ordered. "It's not responding," a technician cried. "It's like the system's fighting back." Savannah's gaze darted to the largest screen, lines of code streaming endlessly. In the middle of the mess flashed one name, over and over. Celine Montgomery. Her breath caught. "Chase, your wife's system file. It's active." He turned sharply. "That's impossible. I buried every trace of it." But the code didn't lie. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Savannah ran to the lower servers, tracing the signature to a hidden drive beneath the palace library. The door creaked open into a cold room filled with humming machines and dust. Among the stacks sat a small projector, blinking red. On it, a handwritten tag. "Play me, CM." She hesitated, then pressed play. The static cleared, revealing Celine Montgomery, alive, radiant, her eyes shimmering with intelligence and exhaustion. "If you're watching this," Celine's voice said softly, "then Chase has lost everything he couldn't control, including me." Savannah's heart pounded. "I tried to stop him," Celine continued. "His empire runs on surveillance, not innovation. Every act of generosity, every charity, every scholarship, they all feed his system. He says he's saving the world, but he's building one that belongs only to him." The recording crackled. "And if I disappear, it won't be because I died. It'll be because he couldn't stand to lose." Then, static. Chase appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I told you not to come down here," he said quietly. Savannah turned, tears streaking her cheeks. "She tried to stop you. She misunderstood me. She feared you." "She loved me," he snapped, the calm finally breaking. "Everything I built was for her." Savannah shook her head. "No, you built it for control, and now it's controlling you." He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "You don't understand. This system, it's all I have left of her. And now it's destroying you both." A thunderous sound shook the room. Upstairs, glass shattered, an explosion of sparks and alarms. Guards shouted, "The mainframe's collapsing!" Savannah and Chase ran back into the hall just as a chandelier crashed to the floor, scattering shards like diamonds. Smoke filled the corridor. The entire palace seemed to groan under its own weight. "Emergency lockdown protocol," a voice echoed from the walls. "Evacuate all personnel immediately." But the gates wouldn't open. They were trapped. In the chaos, Chase grabbed Savannah's arm. "You need to listen to me," he said over the noise. "Celine wasn't innocent. She was trying to sell my data to our rivals." Savannah froze. "You're lying." "Am I?" "She wanted to end me, Savannah. She said I'd turned into a god without mercy. But she wasn't trying to save me. She was trying to beat me." Savannah shook her head, clutching the flash drive in her hand. "No, she wanted to expose you, not replace you." Chase's eyes softened, grief bleeding through anger. "I didn't kill her," he said quietly. "But I didn't save her either." Footsteps echoed from behind them. Guards running, shouting. "She's in here! Chase turned, fury flashing. "They think you're the breach." "Why?" Savannah gasped. "Because Valerie made it that way. You were the distraction she needed to access the system." Savannah's heart raced. "Then we have to stop her." Chase nodded grimly. "Follow me." They moved through the back halls, through marble corridors and hidden staircases that led deep beneath the palace. The tunnels were built for emergencies, Chase explained. Celine designed them. The irony stung. "She built your escape from yourself." He almost smiled. Maybe she knew I'd need saving someday. The ground trembled again. Lights flickered. Walls cracked. Dust rained from the ceiling. They reached a sealed iron door. Chase entered a passcode, but the panel sparked and died. "She's locked us out," he muttered. "Who?" "Celine." The server lights above flickered, her name still pulsing across every screen. In the corner, Savannah noticed something. A small chamber door ajar. Inside were shelves stacked with tapes, journals, and hard drives labeled Project Echelon. She grabbed one and pressed play on a nearby monitor. The footage showed Celine sitting at her desk, whispering into the camera. "He doesn't see it yet, but I'm documenting everything. Someday, someone will find this. Someone who can forgive what he couldn't face." Savannah covered her mouth. She was talking to me. A deafening crack split the ceiling. Fire alarms blared. "Savannah, go!" Chase shouted. She stumbled backward as debris crashed around them. He pushed her toward the exit, shielding her from the falling glass. Smoke swallowed the hall. Through the haze, she saw his silhouette, standing amid firelight, one arm covering his face, eyes glowing with both terror and relief. "Chase!" she screamed. He turned once, voice breaking through the roar. "Do you still see me as a man? Or a monster?" Before she could answer, the ceiling gave way, and the world went black. In the silence that followed, the palace stood wounded, its glass cracked, its secrets bleeding into the smoke. But deep beneath the ruins, a red light still blinked, and the name Celine Montgomery refused to die. When the dust settled, power meant nothing. All that remained were the ghosts of choices, and the thin line between love and legacy. When Savannah opened her eyes, the world was gray. Smoke curled through the air like fading memories. She was lying on cold marble, her ears ringing with silence. The palace, once immaculate, now looked human for the first time. Cracked, broken, mortal. She rose slowly, coughing. "Chase." No answer. The chandeliers hung shattered. The walls, once white as bone, were scarred with soot. A fire burned somewhere deep in the east wing, painting the air orange. She stumbled through the corridors, calling his name. "Chase!" Still nothing. Hours later, she found the remaining staff gathered in the west courtyard. Ms. Lang was there, her uniform torn, her usual composure replaced by quiet shock. "The servers are gone," Lang murmured. "The systems collapsed completely." Savannah scanned the faces. "Where's Chase Montgomery?" Lang hesitated. "No one knows. His last order was to open the lower exits. After that—" Her voice trailed off. Savannah turned toward the ruined hall, the north wing, now buried under rubble. Something deep inside her whispered, "He's alive." That night, the palace stood quiet again. No alarms, no voices, just the faint hum of machines still clinging to life somewhere underground. Savannah wandered into the library, the only room untouched by chaos. There, on the desk, she found a single object, a white journal, Celine's final one. Inside was a note written in Chase's handwriting. "To rebuild something pure, you must first burn what was false." Her eyes filled with tears. "You burned everything, Chase, including yourself." The following day, an unfamiliar man arrived at the palace gates, a government official. "The Montgomery assets have been frozen," he said. "All operations under investigation. You're free to leave, Miss Reed." Free. The word tasted strange. She thought of her mother, frail, waiting for calls that never came. Of Elijah, vanished. Of Celine, the woman who left behind journals instead of justice. And of Chase, the man who'd blurred the lines between sin and sorrow. Savannah returned to Aurora for the first time in months, Her mother lay in a quiet hospital room, her hair thinner, her eyes brighter with tears. "My girl," she whispered. "You came back." Savannah held her hand. "I had to." Her mother smiled weakly. "That place? It changed you." Savannah looked out the window. "No, it revealed me." Days later, as she packed her things, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, until the voice said, "Savannah." Her heart stopped. "Chase?" He sounded weak, older. "Don't ask where I am, just listen. You survived." "Barely." He coughed softly. "The system's gone. The empire's dead. Maybe that's mercy." "Then what now?" A pause. "I want you to have something." "What?" "You'll know when it finds you." The line went dead. Weeks later, a courier arrived with a single envelope marked "Private." Inside, a handwritten letter. "Savannah, there are two kinds of love. One that saves you, and one that ruins you. You were both. I can't rebuild this empire, but I can offer you its truth. Stay and inherit it. Or walk away, and I'll make sure it forgets you ever existed. Chase." She folded the letter carefully, her hands trembling. Stay, and become part of the world that nearly destroyed her. Or leave, and abandon everything she had uncovered. Savannah returned to the ruins one last time. The palace stood hollow, the marble cracked, the mirrors shattered, the gardens wilted. She walked through the north wing. There, under a beam of pale light, she saw him, Chase Montgomery, alive but changed. A limp, a scar along his jaw, his suit replaced by simple clothes. He turned when he heard her. "You came back. I had to see what was left." He smiled faintly. "Just me, I suppose." Savannah stepped closer. "What are you going to do now?" "Start again, smaller, cleaner." He met her gaze. "With you, maybe." Her breath caught. "You're asking me to stay?" "I'm asking you to understand," he said softly. "Love cannot survive full truth. But maybe legacy can." Before she could answer, a sound came from behind. A shuffle, a whisper. Elijah emerged from the shadows, his face bruised, his eyes heavy. "You shouldn't trust him," he said. "Elijah?" Savannah gasped. "You're alive." He nodded. "Barely. But I found something you need to see." From his coat, he pulled a folded document, Celine's divorce papers. "She was leaving him," Elijah said. "The night she died." Chase's face went pale. "That's not true." "She signed them," Elijah said firmly. "You just never filed them." The silence that followed was colder than fire. Savannah looked at Chase. "You said you buried the past, but the past is still breathing." Chase stepped closer, his voice breaking. "You can hate me if you must, but don't pretend you don't understand me." She looked into his eyes, saw the boy who once wanted to build something beautiful, and the man who lost himself trying. "I understand you," she whispered. "That's why I can't stay." He swallowed hard. "So this is goodbye." She nodded. "Goodbye, Chase." She turned, walking toward the exit, the sunlight spilling through the broken glass ahead. Behind her, Chase whispered, "You were never just a maid." That night, from the train leaving Aurora, Savannah sent a single text to his number, unsure if it would ever be received. "I forgive you, but I won't become you." The message delivered. The House of Montgomery had fallen, but Savannah's story hadn't ended, because every empire that burns leaves behind ashes rich enough to grow something new. Freedom isn't walking away from chains. It's learning not to wear them again. Months after the fall of the Montgomery Palace, Savannah finally understood that. The skyline of Atlanta shimmered like a promise. No marble walls, no guards, no ghosts, just a city that moved, breathed, and asked nothing of her but courage. Savannah stood in the modest office of a new foundation, her foundation. A simple brass plaque on the door read, "The Rise Initiative, Empowering Women in Technology." Her fingers traced the words. It wasn't a palace, but it was hers. Built not on secrets, but on purpose. The first months were hard. Funding was scarce, skepticism high. But Savannah had learned something in the house of Montgomery. Persistence is the quietest form of rebellion. She trained girls from underfunded schools, taught them coding, analytics, ethics, lessons she'd learned from both economics and survival. At night, she stayed late, writing proposals, answering emails, fighting exhaustion. And though she never spoke his name again, his influence lingered, not in her heart, but in her drive to do better than he ever did. One morning, her assistant rushed in, eyes wide. "Savannah, you have to see this." A new wire transfer had arrived, $500,000. No sender, no memo, just the reference line for what she's building. Savannah stared at the screen, her chest tightening. It couldn't be. And yet she knew. She whispered under her breath, "You kept your promise." As months passed, whispers began to circulate online. Articles, blog posts, and podcasts spoke of the maid who changed a billionaire. Some said she exposed him. Some said she saved him. No one knew the truth, and Savannah didn't correct them. Some stories were safer as myths. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, a package arrived. No return address, no markings. Inside were 3 items, Celine Montgomery's original journals, the ones that had vanished during the chaos. A single silver key, a note that read, "For your truth, not mine." Her hands trembled as she opened the first journal. Celine's handwriting was fragile but fierce. If he ever finds peace, it will be because someone else had the courage to hold a mirror to his soul. Savannah pressed her palm to the page, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, not to Celine alone, but to every woman who had ever been silenced inside marble walls. Months later, Savannah stood on stage at a tech conference, her first major keynote. The lights were blinding, the crowd expectant. She adjusted the microphone and smiled. "When I was 22, she began, "I thought freedom meant escaping the powerful. Now I know it means using what you've learned from them, without becoming them." Applause filled the hall. In the crowd, cameras flashed, and somewhere, a man in the back row, older, grayer, stood quietly, watching. Chase Montgomery. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. He didn't approach her. He just nodded once, like a ghost granting permission to move on. That night, Savannah sat alone on her apartment balcony, city lights painting gold across her skin. She thought about how far she'd come, from the marble corridors of control to the open air of self-made purpose. For the first time, silence felt like peace, not punishment. She took out her notebook, the same one she had written in during her first days at the palace. On a fresh page she wrote, "Maybe the palace didn't fall. Maybe I carried it with me and rebuilt it where love didn't hurt." Weeks later, a news headline caught her eye. Reclusive billionaire Chase Montgomery announces Global Tech Ethics Fund, dedicated to the memory of Celine and Savannah Reed. Her breath caught. He had used her name, publicly. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Legacy," she whispered. "That's what you chose instead of love." A year later, Savannah received an invitation on thick white paper. Private memorial, the Montgomery estate. She almost threw it away. Almost. But curiosity still lived in her bones. The palace had been restored, not as a fortress, but as a museum. Its new purpose, to fund ethical research, scholarships, and transparency in innovation. When Savannah stepped through the gates, she felt the ghost stir, but softly, like a welcome instead of a warning. She walked through the gallery until she found a portrait at the center, Celine, and beside it, a new painting, her own. Underneath it, a small plaque read, "For the woman who reminded the world that compassion is the highest form of intelligence." Savannah's eyes blurred with tears. She didn't need to ask who had commissioned it. She already knew. That night, she returned to her Atlanta office, unlocked a new folder on her computer, and titled it, Operation Rise from Ruins. Inside, she began designing a new project, one that would help survivors of corruption rebuild their lives with dignity. The screen glowed softly, reflecting her calm, determined face. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was running from the past. She was building something beyond it. And as the city lights flickered against her window, Savannah whispered, "The palace didn't break me. It built the woman I was always meant to be." Some stories don't end where they began. They come full circle, not to repeat themselves, but to prove that the broken can build again. Years passed. Time softened the pain, but never erased it. The world had moved on from the Montgomery scandal, the collapse of an empire that once ruled in silence. But for Savannah Reed, that story was never about destruction. It was about rebirth. The morning sun rose over Lagos, Nigeria, washing the skyline in gold. Savannah stood on the balcony of a glass building that overlooked the Atlantic, a place she'd built with her own hands, her own name, and her own moral compass. A new sign shimmered above the doors below. The Montgomery Institute of Ethics and Innovation. It wasn't Chase's idea. It was hers. And it wasn't a palace anymore. It was a promise. Inside, young engineers and thinkers filled the halls. Women and men from across Africa and beyond, working to merge technology with conscience. They didn't bow to wealth. They bowed to wisdom. That afternoon, her assistant entered quietly. "Miss Reed," she said, "he's here." Savannah's heart fluttered, not with fear this time, but with memory. She turned toward the window as Chase Montgomery stepped into her office. Older now, slower, but calmer. He wore no designer suit, no arrogance, just a simple gray coat and tired eyes that looked like they'd finally stopped running. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them carried years of silence, forgiveness, and unfinished sentences. "You rebuilt it," Chase said softly, looking around the institute. "You took what I destroyed and turned it into light." Savannah smiled faintly. "No, Chase, we did." He met her gaze, surprise flickering across his face. "You still believe there's a we?" "There always was," she said, "just not the kind you thought." They walked together through the building, through halls filled with screens, classrooms, and labs. Chase stopped at a display in the center, an exhibit titled "The Legacy of Celine Montgomery." White roses surrounded her portrait. A piano played softly in the background. He whispered, "She'd have loved this." Savannah looked at him, voice gentle. "Then maybe she's finally at peace." He nodded slowly, the weight of his mistakes still visible in his eyes. "Savannah, I wanted to protect you once." "You did," she said quietly, "just not in the way you meant." He smiled, a real smile this time, fragile but sincere. "You were always the storm I never saw coming." They stopped at the door leading to the North Wing exhibit, a reconstructed replica of the room where it had all begun. The marble floors, the piano, the portraits, all preserved not as a shrine, but as a lesson. "This place feels different now," Chase murmured. "Because it's honest," Savannah said. He turned to her, eyes misted. "Do you forgive me?" "I already did," she replied. "But forgiveness isn't about you, Chase. It's about freeing the part of me that once needed your permission to exist." He closed his eyes, exhaling shakily. "Then I can finally rest." Savannah reached into her bag and handed him something wrapped in white paper. He unfolded it, Celine's final letter, the one he'd never seen. Chase's lips trembled as he read aloud. "If love means control, then I was never loved. But if love means release, then maybe we'll meet again. When the world we built stops hurting others." His voice cracked at the end. For a long while, they stood in silence, just two souls who had finally run out of reasons to fight. As they reached the courtyard, Chase turned to her one last time. "What will you do now?" Savannah smiled. "Keep building, but not palaces, people." He nodded, pride glimmering faintly in his eyes. "Then maybe the world's finally in better hands." She placed a hand on his arm. "Take care of yourself, Chase." He hesitated, then whispered, "You were never my maid, Savannah." She smiled softly. "No, I was your mirror." He walked away slowly, disappearing into the sunlight. Not as a billionaire, not as a ghost, but as a man who'd finally let go. Moments later, one of the interns approached Savannah, a young woman, bright-eyed, nervous, full of questions. "Ma'am," she said shyly, "why do we call this place the Palace of Minds?" Savannah looked around, the glass walls glowing with reflection, the students buzzing with ideas, the world alive with possibility. "Because," she said, smiling, "every person who walks through these doors learns the same truth I did." The intern tilted her head. "And what's that?" Savannah glanced at the sunlight flooding the hall. "The real palace," she said softly, "was never made of marble. It was inside me all along." The farewell scene. Later, as dusk painted the sky in amber and violet, Savannah stood alone at the Institute's entrance. The breeze carried the faint scent of roses. White ones, always white. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "I was never a maid. I was always the storm." And with that, she smiled. Not the smile of survival, but of sovereignty. The palace on the hill was long gone. But within Savannah Reed, a new one stood, built from truth, rebuilt from ruin, and alive with compassion. A woman became more than the role assigned to her. She became her own palace.